So, hi Marina, thanks so much for joining us. It's really nice to see you. You're an emotional counsel for female inheritors. So, the first thing I'd like you to explain is just really how you got to where you are and like what kind of inspired this journey.
Thank you so much for having me here. The journey wasn't really obvious to me actually, and but to give you some context of where I am today, I support female inheritors to move from a place of survival and fear and guilt into a place of sovereignty, and ultimately, what that would look like is she lands, she inherits, and she moves from being a female inheritor into being a sovereign steward. They're two very different identities. So my journey started 15 years ago when I inherited a life-changing sum, but not enough to to see me through if and when I actually got it wrong. So on paper, I was financially free. However, that wasn't the experience I was living in.
Mm.
And the thing is, at the time, I was working in the music industry. And when my father passed away, I decided that I would go out on my own. And I went full on into the coaching industry and the transformation industry. And so I worked with women in all sorts of ways over the last 16 years. I've written books on divorce. I've written books on mums in business and how to create an effortless lifestyle. I've pivoted quite a few times. But if I were to draw a thread to every single one of those experiences, I would say that I've always helped her move from sort of a chaos, internal chaos, into clarity and inner peace ultimately.
Mm.
So I went into my own inner chaos back in 2020, and I decided to take some time out. But during that time, I realized that I felt deeply unsafe. And this was just off the back of having worked with somebody in my financial education for about 5 years. And I felt deeply unsafe around the fact that I wasn't having the income coming in. And I realized that I had a deep distrust that my assets could hold me. So I'd moved into this generation of income, generation of income, generation of income, generation of income. And when I decided to stop, it was almost like the fear took hold and I was almost paralyzed. I had this low grade anxiety that kept coming up. And it was actually the reality I lived in. For if I was honest with myself, it's the reality I'd lived in from the moment I inherited. And so
I love.
I hadn't really made sense of this at all because I was too busy working, too busy leaning forward, too busy creating things from a place of anxiety and fear. And I hadn't
Mm.
really understood that my MO at that point was to do lots of things so as to not feel that. And it became very apparent to me that that wasn't working. It looks so, you see it when you see it. And so
Yeah.
I got curious about that and I actually decided to do I decided to do some archetype work, some feminine archetype work, some deep polarity work as well. And I realized that as I moved through those experiences for myself and I shifted and changed, I also noticed that the anxiety started to wane. And
Ah.
and at the time I didn't really it was an interesting one. I wasn't really focusing on wealth and money or anything like that. I was just focusing on me and my inner being and my relationship to men and my relationship to the masculine and my relationship to my feminine and all of that. And I hadn't really understood it. And it wasn't until last year
Wow.
that I started to make sense of all of this. And what I discovered was that I had been on a journey of identity, but I hadn't really understood it because there wasn't any literature on it. There was when I started to
Mm.
look into this, I there was nothing on this whatsoever, actually.
Yeah.
There was a lot of financial education, which is what I went through and what I did, which was really helpful. And so that's when I learned about investing. That's when I learned about understanding what goes in and out of your bank account. So at the time I had no understanding of any of this. I never had to. So having money and living and being brought up in privilege, I never had to worry about that. That was
Yeah.
never on my remit whatsoever in the least, right?
Mm.
And I just assumed that when I inherited that yes, I hit the jackpot, the Holy Grail. How wonderful is this? And I'm going to be rich forever. Well, no, that was what I'd been sold. It wasn't actually my experience. And what I've realized now is that our experience is actually the most important thing because you can have millions in the bank and be terrified and create this experience and reality inside of you that has you believe that you can't touch it, that it's dangerous, and you live in this fear and this low grade anxiety, and that's no way
Mm.
to live, right?
No,
So you may well be financially free on paper, but not necessarily free to be on the inside.
exactly.
So so, but I'm sharing this with you now today with clarity because I had no understanding of this. It's such a huge blind spot for me. And this is me having worked with women in all sorts of ways, shapes, and forms, right? Because
Mm.
I was so focused on the relationships. I was so focused on working in the relationship field that the financial one just wasn't in my purview.
Mm.
While financial education had been, the experience of that and how I felt about it, I hadn't really explored that. So here's me, 2020, with all of this financial education. I knew how to invest, basic, like invest in the markets, invest in property, understanding IRR, understanding return on investment, all of these things. Sounds really cool. But on the inside, once again, I just felt deeply, deeply unsafe. And so it wasn't until about a year and a half ago, actually, that I decided I would start to be in the working world again, because up until that point, I'd just given myself some reprieve. Um, and that reprieve wasn't really a reprieve, it was a massive initiation into what I now call my empress. But ultimately, I went from living in this beautiful home, um, and I'd made up this massive story that I had to sell it. So I sold it. I sold it for actually not very, I didn't sell it well. I then bought a doer-upper that went horribly wrong. And I spent a year and pretty much about a year in a deep, deep depression. Now, for most of you listening to this, you're like, well, yeah, what's your problem? Well, once again, I hope I'm really highlighting something here, which is that the exterior has got nothing to do with how you experience things.
Exactly, exactly.
So, I lived in a place of regret because what my decisions um had all been based around fear. And this is when I started to realize that. So I decided to go back into the working world. And I looked at an opportunity that I really excited me. And I decided, okay, well, let's see how we go. And it started to do really well. But the opportunity in and of itself was leading a team of women. And it was also it actually got me to start talking about my investing journey. It got me talking about passive income. It got me talking about all the things that I'd really kept locked away for so many years. I never really talked about it with anybody. And as I did so, I started to realize like the resistance that I was in around sharing this with people started to wane. It started to dissolve. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I didn't even realize that I had any of that left or that any of that was going on. And it was in a conversation with a woman, with a lady who's now become a very good friend, that I went and had a coffee with her. And we were talking about my journey. And she said to me, well, why aren't you supporting women in this? And I looked at her and I heard the voice of inspiration or the voice of the divine or the voice of spirit say to me, this is your legacy work. And at the time, I
Mm.
was like, what do you mean it's my legacy work? First of all, I'd never heard that word. Like the whole the two words together, legacy work, had never been put together in my book. I'd always just been like, well, this is what I'm up to right now. But suddenly I heard legacy work and I just thought, whoa, that's a whole new experience for me. I don't even know what that means. So I spent about a week trying to make sense of that conversation and trying to make sense of what legacy work meant. But as I started to explore my journey, because I was like, okay, well, this has got something to do with my journey. This has got something to do with money and finance and women. But what is this? Because I had no, it wasn't clear to me. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I wake up one morning and go, right, I'm going to be a financial coach, or oh yeah, I'm going to work with female inheritors. That sounds great. It wasn't clear, and I had to make sense of that. So I've really spent I started talking about my inheritance journey. And I thought, okay, well, this is a bit edgy for me, to start talking about what I had been feeling. And so I started talking to people because I had no understanding of what was on in the financial industry. Um, it was money and finance and wealth was never part. I was kind of the identity I lived in was free spirit, hugging trees, go do yoga in Bali, um, ecstatic dance, and all of that. And I'm not, and I still love to travel and I still love to dance and all of those things. But I hadn't truly integrated my wealth into my life. It was
Mm.
kind of on the sidelines. It's something that was there, but that, oh, I'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of really poignant moments in this journey for me that really shifted the needle. Um, One of them was my partner, who is such a truth teller in a way that you cannot but hear what he has to say, because he'll just drop a line. It'll be a one-liner. And you're like, what? What just happened? And we were coming back from an investment conference, and he said to me, I don't understand something. Can you explain this to me? He said, you call yourself a coach, but yet you don't make a living from that. You make a living from your investments. Why don't you just call yourself an investor? And it was such news to me that actually was, I was like, what?
That you had to own that. Mm.
Yeah. And so he was so right, though. Like, if I
Yeah.
looked, I'm like, of course I'm an investor.
Yeah.
Like, I live off my assets. So why am I not owning that? Like, what is this?
Mm.
All right. And I was I was really
It's a
perplexed.
hard one to own though, because we see like we imagine that an investor is like some wealthy looking man who like maybe works in finance or you know.
Right. And I'd made so many mistakes along the way. I'd invested in things that now I look back and I go, girl, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking small amounts, I'm talking
Mm.
like big
Mm.
chunks of money. And and I had been shaming myself for so many years on that I didn't think
Mm.
that I had earned the title. Um,
Right. You
uh,
thought you had to do it perfectly.
yeah, or there was some sort of like I don't know, you arrive at this destination and that's when you become an investor. There's like some sort of pin or a badge they they give you. And I'd be living in this reality of I'm a coach, I'm a coach, that's what I want to be, that's what I want to be, that's what I am, that's what I am, that's what I am, that's where I sit, that's where I sit, that's where I sit. But once again, that it was almost like, yeah, yeah, but the wealth is different. That's over there.
Mm. It wasn't part of your identity yet.
No, no, it really, really wasn't. But my partner could see that. He could see
Mm.
that it was, but he couldn't understand why I kept pretending that it wasn't. And so that was a really poignant moment to me because I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Justine, where something's kind of in your purview. It's kind of not in this front stage center of who you are, but I saw it visually for me. For me,
Mm.
things are quite visual. So I saw it come from either left, right or hand. It was on the side, and suddenly it was front and center. And I was like, oh wow, it's arrived. Here it is. Wow. So this conversation with this woman, going back to this, um, I'd already owned that, but what I hadn't owned yet was, did I have, like, who am I to work with women like this? Right. So I was
Yeah,
still in
I'm
that.
not worthy.
What do I bring to the table? I mean, that I think that was probably my question was, what do I bring to the table? And what is it that I want to talk about? Because yes, I have an investing journey. 15 years of that, 15 years of insight, 15 years of investing in oil wells, in things that scams, in Chinese containers. I mean, a whole bunch of things that went horribly, horribly wrong. Um, but I also have deep insight into those experiences
Mm.
and
What not
learning.
to do.
But also, what it did is made me realize that actually I have a capacity to be quite courageous and go where nobody else has gone. And I thought, well,
Mm.
that actually is something that's really valuable.
But
And that,
you're a risk taker.
yes, I'm less of one these days, by the way. And I
Mm.
think that's a good thing. Every gift, I think, has also its shadow and its Achilles heel. And so while I've been bold and courageous and adventurous, and you can adopt that identity and it's all great and fun, there's also a dark side to that too.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to
And
take calculated risk.
right, whatever that means. But yeah, you have to understand. So what I started to see is you have your portfolio, you have your assets, but you have to understand how they all fit together. You have to understand what each one does, and you have to
Mm.
understand um, what you need for you. Because ultimately, somebody else may see an investment and that's totally aligned for who they are and where they're at and what their life needs. But for me, it might be something completely different.
Mm.
But
Exactly.
I was living in a world of, I was living in the world of, how do I get this right? Am I getting it wrong? I wasn't in the world that I live in now, which is what would I love to invest in? And does
Mm.
it actually align with who I am and my future? So
Yeah.
my reality has completely shifted around that. But
Did
going,
you speak
yeah.
to any financial advisors or wealth managers along the way? Well, I mean,
Oh yeah.
what was
Yeah.
that experience like?
Well, hence why I didn't have any.
Yeah.
I fired my dad's financial advisor, not because he was a bad guy at all. He's a lovely, lovely man, and I have a deep respect for him. But because I I was living in a world of entitlement at the time, I think, and complete naivety actually. But also he wanted to charge me 5%. And so I was like, well, hang on a second. Even me that is necessarily great with numbers can see that that's quite a hefty chunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I found that really restricting. So I found it restricting in the sense of here's another this is all we can do. You can only invest in the markets.
Wasn't flexible. Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think that's a really interesting point that a lot of financial professionals don't understand about women is like you said, you're looking for investments that you love and that align with like your values. A lot of them don't understand that. They're just like, it's black and white. you know.
because they live in a system that doesn't allow them to go beyond that. It's not that they don't want to, but the other thing that I've seen and realized and spoken to quite a few now is that the system is set up to enable and disable the client.
Exactly. Oh, that's so true.
Because it's like, no, don't worry about that. I'll take care of all of that. And so you
Yes.
as the woman, you as the client don't actually get to understand. And most
Exactly. It's like, don't worry your pretty little head about that. We'll deal with it for
we'll deal
you.
with it. We'll take care of it, which is fine. I mean, here's what I see now is that and all of this has really come to light in the last year for me, this
Mm,
understanding, because I've actually had so many conversations with people in the financial industry. I've read a lot because once again, I knew nothing about what was going on. Nothing.
yeah.
I was living in my own little bubble, avoiding all of that. And so, lo and behold, there's this $1 trillion wealth transfer. I had no idea that was going on, but I knew that I wanted to be a voice because I'd had the experience of not being prepared, of being completely thrown out into the world and go,
Mm,
off you go do it. Um, I didn't know who to trust. I I'm a manifester. I don't know if you know anything about human
yeah.
design. We hate to be told what to do. So
yeah.
having a financial advisor that was telling me what to do just pissed me off, quite frankly. So I was like, nope, that's not for me.
Mm,
But I was
mm.
so naive. I didn't know. Like I was 35 years old, and emotionally, I had still a lot of my journey to carry on through that. But
So how did you said that you educated yourself on finance. What what sources did you use to get there? Like what did you find was the most
so
helpful?
this was back in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
when it felt like, well, I inherited in 2013, and I was looking to understand like who's out there that can help me with this.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for a financial advisor. I'm looking for somebody that can actually really support me in creating a plan, and I didn't even know about wealth planners. I mean, honestly, it was just complete carnage in that sense. And I read, Robert Kiyosaki's books, amazing. But I didn't, I sort of flirted with the idea of working with his company, but I just didn't resonate with him, nor did I. I loved his books, but I was like, no, this isn't quite right for me.
Mm.
And it wasn't until it wasn't until I think it was June of 2015 when I was still waiting for a property to sell. The money hadn't come through yet. I've been waiting for about 6 months. There was a chain. God knows why I didn't cancel it right from the outset and move on and see if I could find another buyer. Well, that was who I was at back then. Couldn't say no to those sorts of things. And and then I realized, oh my God, I don't have enough money to pay my bills this month. So that was the first time that I'd really kind of went, huh, I probably need to kind of understand why I'm in this situation, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
asset rich, cash poor.
Right. That's so common. Yeah.
So at the time I was like, well, I have no money to pay for my bills or food or anything like that. Anyway,
Mm.
at that moment, I had a credit card, so I decided, right, I'm just going to use it until the money comes in. There was a Facebook ad, and it was for financial education course with this amazing woman called Ann Wilson, who, if you don't know who she is, please look her up. She's just incredible. And I thought, well, she probably knows something that I don't. probably need to know about this and learn more about that. But of course, there was fear. It's like, oh my God, it's 140 euros or whatever it was at the time, and I don't have any money to buy food. But something inside of me just went, just do it. And so I did. And I never, I mean, that was the start of my education. I did the sort of workshop side of things that she was promoting, and then I went and did her financial freedom university course. And then I stepped up and went and did her gourmet experience, which was really working one to one with her and a smaller group of women, a smaller group of people. And that was phenomenal because I learned so much on that journey. Um, but what I hadn't realized that when I stopped working with her, the anxiety came back. And what I realized is
Um,
I'd become completely codependent on her.
uh,
I'd seen her as my security blanket. So when she disappeared, when she stopped doing the one-to-one work, I was like, oh, I still feel really, really shitty. Well, maybe I need to look into that. So that's how I learned about portfolio design. That's where I learned about uh, net worth. That's where I learned about freedom number. That's where I learned about um, index trackers, where I didn't have to have a financial advisor. I could just put my money in the markets and actually have a platform that could do that for me.
I think
Um,
that's really, really important, that point you made about like when people inherit, or even if it's like they sell a business, or they, after a divorce, they get a big chunk of money. It's like if you don't have that experience of ever having to manage money or invest before, it's like you're quite weak physically as a person, and somebody's handed you this really big, heavy weight. And that's why I call my program Money Muscles, because it's about teaching women how to strengthen those investment muscles so that they can feel empowered to do it themselves. So they're not, codependent or reliant on either a financial advisor or a coach, that they can learn that both from a financial perspective, financial education, but also what you were talking about feeling like you deserve it, and all that sort of inner work, figuring out what your archetype is.
right. So um, it's really important to have both. And I
Yeah.
think for the longest time, financial education, I mean, so what I've seen, the evolution of this is I celebrate the fact that now there are loads of investing clubs for women. There's a real movement for women to go and invest, right?
Yeah.
Well, at least the algorithm on LinkedIn shows me that the world is abundant of all of that. You can find books on it now, etc. At the time when I inherited, there was nothing for women.
Mm.
And so thinking about the fact that, 50 years ago we had to ask permission to have a bank account be opened by a man,
Oh,
and now we're inheriting this wealth. To
mm.
me, it,
It's a
it's
huge change.
it's a massive change, but also a very rapid one.
Mm.
So we've been kind of left in the what the fuck, the deer in the headlights, like what the hell's going on? Because there hasn't been, it hasn't caught up yet.
Yeah.
So the, but I'm here, to be honest, I'm here to change that. So I then, as I said, like I was trying to make sense of it, and then I realized my journey has been one of identity shifting. Um, And that never stops, by the way. There's always the next version of who you are because your soul wants to experience itself more and more and more and more and more and more. So that's infinite. That's never going, it's a journey of ever going, evolution, ever going, evolution. It
Mm.
will take you to the next version of yourself. How many times we do not know because it's infinite.
Yeah.
So who you are today won't be the same as next year. If you choose to keep growing and keep moving in the direction of your desires, if you keep moving in the direction of your nudges and your your curiosity, Um, and this is what I've noticed for me is that I'm not the same woman as I was a year ago. And I don't expect to be the same woman next year or the year after or the year after that. And I think there seems to be this sort of fallacy that you just stay where you are and somehow that is okay. But the minute that wealth lands and this big chunk lands, life is asking something of you, right? So
Mm.
there's a transition that's happening. Now, for me, I think where if I'd known a few things, it would have made this journey so much easier for me. So, first of all, if I'd known that this was a rite of passage, if I'd known that this was an initiation into the next evolution of me, just knowing that would have made a massive difference because it would have been, okay, now I know which context I'm living in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think they think financial education is the solution, that it's just, oh, just give them a book and then they'll understand money. But it's like what you were saying about the identity shift and understanding things at a much deeper level, and the person you have to become, which is, you can't just get that from a book. Like,
No, well, I certainly couldn't. I'm too impatient for that. And I'm a 3-5 in my human design, which basically means I have to experience life. I have to experience the learning and then come back to the
mm,
collective and say, please don't do that.
yeah.
Please don't do that. But I've done that and it doesn't work, or I've done this and it does work. So what I realized that does work is understanding which context you're living in. So if you understand that this wealth is asking you to move and expand into a different version of you, and I call her the Empress, then you understand, okay, this is the context I'm playing in. Now I have a choice. Do I want to move in the direction of where I'm being asked to go, or do I just want to stay here? Now, there's no wrong or right in this answer, but to understand that there is even that question to be answered is so helpful because I didn't know. I just thought it was an
Mm,
event. You get given the money and that's it. But it's
yeah.
not. It's the start of a whole new journey, a whole new chapter, a whole new you, if
Yeah, who
you
you become.
of who you become. Because inheriting wealth is not the same as stewarding it. It
Mm,
really is not. And as much as you'd like not to, and abdicate your role, which I did many times, it doesn't work, by the way. Um, Abdicating my role looked like handing money over to scammers. Abdicating my role uh, was looked like thinking that somebody else knew better than me. Abdicating my role looked like avoiding um, taking care of my assets. Abdicating my role was about not really challenging my own reality. I mean, there's abdicating your role can manifest itself in a lot of ways, but I was me too, major abdicator. Um, and I was so scared of the responsibility that I would get it
yeah.
wrong
Oh, I
that
think that's big.
abdication seemed like the only choice.
Yeah. And a lot of people talk as well about feeling guilty when they inherit.
Yes. So this is so in the journey of making sense of all of this, I decided to get curious and life brought me quite a few female inheritors to talk to. So I started talking about my journey. I actually got interviewed by Female, which is the Daily Mail um female version of the Daily Mail last year, and I shared my story. Um, and in sharing my story on Facebook and sharing my story on LinkedIn and sharing how I'm feeling, what was going on, etc., a few women came back to me and said, "Oh my God, that me too, me too, me
Mm.
too, me too." So I was like, "Look, I'd love to get on a call with you and I'd love to understand a little bit more about your journey and how you felt, etc." And it turns out that it wasn't just me. it was actually really normal. So the
Mm,
guilt piece, especially what I was seeing was it that really lands quite more significantly for women who have a reality of work hard, I do it for me, I produce, and that really kind of lands in the entrepreneurial space.
mm.
It can also land in the, well, I've got my own job. I feel
Career
guilty.
women.
Yeah, so it lands there more so,
Mm.
right? Um, Now it depends on when it lands. So, for example, my experience of this, because I've always been really independent. I've made my own money. I've made my own way. Not that I was particularly successful at business. And I say that I have been. I've had, you know, a trajectory of success, but not exits or, billions and billions, whatever, right? But
Was your dad an entrepreneur? Is that
no,
oh,
no, he was, um, it's just, he was born in 1917. So any money you put away was going to grow. So he was great at putting money away. Um, and, but his reality, I mean, he bought a property that we lived in, I don't know, back in 1970, right? Property back in the UK at that point was super cheap.
yeah.
So anything that if you kept that, it was always going to grow in value. They bought it for 30K and they sold it at 1.5 million. So that's that gives you an example. And I think back then, not many he just saw the opportunity to put money away to invest. Um, and he had a broker, he had an advisor, and he was just really good at doing that.
So you don't think you learned anything from him, from his, yeah. You went the opposite way, the rebel.
Yeah. It was very confusing for me. The relationship he had with money was very confusing
Okay.
because on the one hand, I knew we lived a really privileged life.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the feeling that I got from the experience of him and the way he treated money was very different. So he was living in a scarcity mindset.
Right.
There isn't enough. Um, and I'll give you an example. We lived in this beautiful grade two listed building in the south of England. And my mother and I had to wear jackets in the wintertime because he didn't want to put the central heating on. He never sent anything first class. It was always second class.
Hmm.
Why would you spend money on that? It's going to get there anyway, right? That was his
Yeah.
thing. And then there were moments where it was like so painful. Like my mother would ask extra money from him, and he'd ask her to pay it back.
Yeah.
So she had to find work. I mean, and she was brilliant. She found ways to create extra income to pay for my clothes. And all the
Right.
while, he had all of this money growing in the markets. And it
They were
just made,
supporting it.
yeah. So I didn't know that I was confused about this until he
Mm,
passed away, because then I realized I've also inherited his scarcity.
right.
And for many, like I remember sitting at an event and sharing that my position, and that one of the coaches said, "Oh, that's amazing. You can choose who you want to work with." But yet, that wasn't the experience I was in. I was desperate. I wanted to find my own clients, and it was all like the deep insecurity around that. And then I heard the divine speak, and it said to me very clearly, that was your father's story,
Not yours.
not mine.
Mm,
You've just been carrying it. And I went, holy shit. Sorry. That and suddenly a whole it was so spacious. It was almost like there was so much spaciousness in that moment for me. I remember it. And it was like I was walking around for a couple of days going, wow, I have space. I have space.
Yeah.
And then oh, a question popped in, which was, who are you now? What is your story?
Mm.
So I was like, well, I haven't figured that out yet, but I'll get back. I'll get back to that. Like
And
a
is that what
second.
you help that, the women you work with, is that how you help them find, what is their story, what the money means to them basically,
So
or could mean?
I discovered that I wanted to have a framework by which I could work.
Mm.
And I realized that the shifts for me, the way in which I never actively worked on my money story. That's not what I did. I just had insights around it. And so I realized that what the question that popped into my head over this last year was, what does sovereignty actually look like? What does it look like if she's fully embracing her empress and she's stewarding her wealth with sovereignty? What does that
Hmm.
actually look like in her life? What is she doing? And who is she being? And so I realized that there were 6 aspects to this. I called them wealth codes. And the first one was she's able to really sit with what she feels. She doesn't have to run away from it. She doesn't have to distract herself. She can just sit with what she feels. She feels fear around the wealth. She's able to name, I feel the fear, but she's able to sit with that and notice it, but not let it reign, not let it hijack her for then that to be the thing that then
Mm.
creates her actions, which for me it was hijacking me for years. So
Yeah.
that would be the first aspect is her relationship to her feelings and her emotions. So when she's in the survival piece, moving into the sovereign one, she's not honoring her emotions, but then she starts to honor them. So that would be the first sort of part of this framework. The second part, the wealth, and the second code, is her speaking her truth, not what she thinks she has to say, not what she's been told to say, what she really fucking wants to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
That for me has been such a journey. Um, I really had to dig deep with this one. And the freedom that I now have to just share my truth, there is no blockage there anymore. There used to be. Um, I had a massive fear around conflict. Um, Not wanting to rock the boat. I'm a 9 in the Enneagram. I don't know if that means anything to you, but I'm the peacekeeper, and conflict to me felt like death.
Okay.
But what I've journeyed with now is that you can still share your truth from a place of love. You don't have to be a bitch about it. You can just share what you're seeing, and
Yeah.
it can come from that place.
Yeah.
And what I noticed inside of me is either the conflict's inside of you or it's out there. It will manifest itself somewhere. But if the conflict's no longer inside of you, it won't manifest itself out there.
Mm.
And honestly, like that has been a game changer for me. So, what does that look like practically? Well, that looks like asking the questions, not being scared to challenge somebody if they're um, saying something to you that you don't like, challenging the somebody else's opinion. telling them that you
Mm.
don't know. There are a lot of women that sit in these meetings,
Yeah.
like feeling like
And
they
just nod
can't,
their heads.
right,
Yeah.
feeling like they can't ask the question.
Yeah, they're scared to ask. They
They're
don't
scared.
stand up themselves. They don't want to be appear to be dumb. Sometimes they're really well educated in another field, but they don't know anything about finance and they don't want to appear dumb, so they just don't ask the questions.
So they don't ask questions. And then they're like, oh, I didn't understand any of that. That must be me. I must be stupid. Actually, it's not. It's actually it's actually deeper than that. It's you didn't speak your truth.
Hmm.
So let's get to work on that.
Right.
The next piece for me is boundaries.
Very important.
Saying no or saying yes, saying no. But what's aligned for you? Like, so I see a lot of women go into philanthropy out of guilt.
Okay. Yeah.
I also see a lot of women saying yes to appease.
And you see
Um,
that as well with like lotto winners who lose their money very quickly because so many people are asking them and they feel like, oh, I've got money now, I can help. And so they get scammed, they get, and especially people who have difficulty with boundaries, they can't just say no. And they can't see that sometimes by giving that money, you're actually going to make that person worse off.
right. And the other thing is family disputes. So it's not uncommon to have inheritance become a massive hand grenade that gets thrown into a family dynamic.
Yeah.
And so if you're the one having to deal with this in the sense of people are coming to you to reclaim that, to you've got to go, well, I'm sorry, but tough. I mean, that's an exaggeration, of course, with love.
Yeah. With love, no. You can do it your own. You don't need me.
But that was also a huge one for me.
Yeah,
The it's so easy to justify why you would say yes.
exactly. And it's so easy for them to say, yeah, but you've got this money. Why not?
Yeah, and
Mm.
you were given more, so it's your responsibility to. But that experience is showing up in your awareness because that's not been healed yet.
Mm.
When you are fully sovereign, none of those sorts of experiences they're not dramatic.
Yeah.
They don't really show up anymore in your life. And that's when you know. Because I used to have all of this going on, by the way, a lot of the time, and experiences used to come into my life to break me out of them.
Mm.
I no longer have those sorts of experiences.
Well, what would you say, like with the women that you've been working with, what would you say is like a very common mistake that they tend to make?
They think that the issue that they have is financial.
Yeah.
The first question they ask is, who do I need to speak to about my money or my
Yeah.
assets? And while that is a great question, I would also add another question in here, which is, who do I need to speak to about taking care of me?
Yeah. It's like they're trying to push it away to be somebody else's
It's
job.
normal because the institution has already like, well, who do I need to speak to that's going to manage this for me? Who do I need to speak
Mm.
to? Who do I need on my team? But the question I would be asking is, who do I need to speak to that can take care of me while I'm actually making all of these decisions?
All right. Mm.
That role currently isn't obvious to me, which is why I want to change that. So then we've got the next piece of this, which is trusting herself. Oh, this is a classic, right? This is a big one where we hand over our power to everybody else because we think they know better, but they don't.
Yes.
And being able to discern what is our wisdom, what is our intuition, and what is
Mm.
our little ego, the difference between the two.
Mm.
Really being able to distinguish between those and making decisions from a place of alignment.
I find that a lot of younger women have got more confidence in themselves. They're usually um, often like better educated because there's a lot of information out there, educating them about financial terms. And so sometimes they feel very confident, but they haven't lived through many market cycles yet, or gone through some of those painful investment experiences. So it's almost like, I mean, it's great that they have this confidence and that they're willing to take action, but it's also a little bit scary because it's like you're watching and thinking, okay, when is this going to go wrong, or how could this go wrong? Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think like what you said about that, I think that power that you're talking about and that wisdom and the intuition, it's not until you know yourself as an investor and you've had those experiences that you can build that, because it's like we said, it's not something you can just learn in a book.
And there's one thing putting your
Mm.
money in the markets, and there's another thing in actually deepening your understanding of investing in other ways.
Mm.
So, what about startups? What about private equity? What about crypto? What about collectibles? What about all of those things? And we tend to just stick with the markets, but actually there's so much more that's available
Yeah.
to us. And not everybody wants to journey into those experiences, but I did.
Yeah.
I realized that actually when I got to that point of stopping asking, am I getting this wrong or right, to what would I love? The world opened up to me. I've just been invited to sit on in an investment circle for women as an advisor. And the thing is that would never have happened if I was still stuck in the fear of, am I getting this wrong? Am I getting this right? But I want to deepen my understanding of other assets. I want to deepen my understanding. I want to be able to read a deal and go, yes, no. Because for me, it's not even about the money. It's about the power, your sovereignty, your capacity to stand your ground and go, actually, let me ask the questions that need to be asked so that I can move my wealth and wisdom forward.
Mm.
But also, who do I want to be surrounded by?
Exactly.
So many years I spent, and this is nothing, I was surrounded by women who had no money.
Yeah. Well, a lot of women didn't in the past. I mean, and those who did have money weren't in that powerful position that you were discussing of feeling in control of it and feeling.
And I would say yes and no to that, because
Mm.
what I realized was I was in the reality of I feel guilty about this money, so therefore I'm going to see if I can help women to make more money. And there was no problem in that whatsoever. But I wasn't being I wasn't reflected in them yet. And now when I realized that my next level, like my next becoming, was to be able to sit in these rooms with women of this caliber who've had years of experience of investing in businesses. Um, and I feel like it's my duty as a steward to put my capital in projects that are actually going to do good in the world.
Yeah.
When I think about the amount of money that I put into the hands of scammers, put into the hands of shit that didn't work. Sorry, that's a French term for something very powerful. Um, it hurts actually.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
hurts because I was like, that capital could have done so much good in the world and it
Yeah.
didn't.
You could have been a positive influence.
But it gave me the learnings.
Mm.
It gave me the
Absolutely.
learnings and it
All
allowed
good.
me to become the woman I am today, to then go out and go, don't do that.
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
it. So then we
Yeah.
go on. There are two more aspects to this. The fifth code is desire, authentic desire. And this is
Hmm.
actually my favorite, but don't tell anybody. This has been such a game changer for me. Is like, what do you want?
Mm.
Not what you expected to want, because a lot of the time when women inherit, they're like, what would they want me to do with the money? What would they want
Right.
me to do with that? That doesn't, the ownership hasn't happened yet, but it's like, what do you want to do? And what
Mm.
this does, and a lot of women go through this, is that when they're giving this pot, right, they think it's finite. I've only got this, therefore I have to preserve it. So
Yes, it's from a fear. Mm.
yeah, so we live in this, and I say we because that was me, by the way. We live in this space of that's all there is.
Yeah.
So I've got to preserve this. I've got to be careful with it. I've got to be prudent with it. I've
Mm.
got to make sure. And, that obviously comes from a lot of conditioning from the past also, because that generation was about hard work and making sure that you didn't do anything stupid with it, et cetera, right? But what
Mm.
I've realized is your authentic desires, um, they are God-given. So by law, the money has to show up.
Yeah.
I've tested this and it works.
Yeah, but that's the manifesting, isn't it? That you deserve it.
Right. So suddenly this pot is no longer, and what that does, it brings her out of scarcity, because scarcity is a big part of
Mm.
all of this, by the way. Moving her from that scarcity into this sort of creator abundant experience that life
Yeah.
is, and who she is. And then finally moving into power, which is really about moving from abdication into sovereign stewardship or responsibility. But ultimately, it's like, yep, I'm taking ownership of this. Um, this is my gig. This is what I'm up to. It's all good.
Mm.
So there's been no roadmap for her up until this point, for her specifically. And I know there are a lot of women like yourselves that are doing incredible work with women in general. But for me, it was very, very important to specifically for her
Yeah.
to give her this roadmap. I've written the book, so that is coming out next year. Because there's
What's
nothing,
the what's the book called? Do you know the title yet or not yet?
yeah, the the working title, we're not sure yet, but the working title
Yeah.
is She Who Inherits,
She Who Inherits.
a rite of passage into sovereignty. We I want there to be this roadmap for her that when she inherits, she's like, okay, I've got to go and seek emotional counsel or emotional stewardship. That's part of my team.
Mm. Great. Wow.
She already has, it's no longer, well, who do I go to? The therapist, which is fine, but I want to standardize it in a way. I want it to be part of that wealth conversation. And I mean, I'm seeing a lot of it now, especially in family office circles where they're realizing that succession is a human issue. It's not just a
Yeah,
capital.
for men as well as women. I think what you were saying earlier about what would they want me to do and how do I just not lose it? I think most of private banking in Europe is based around that concept of this is how you don't lose it, lose it. This is how we're going to put you
Right.
into these funds
Preservation,
that have
preservation,
got
preservation.
barely better than inflation returns, just so that you don't like lose it.
Preservation, right?
Mm.
And I've realized that preservation, scarcity, restriction is all
Yeah,
part of the same thing.
right.
Um, Old paradigm, new paradigm is capital moving, circulation, expansion, um, ownership, sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's where we're moving into, and I'm s- and I'm seeing women lead this. By the way, it's not. Yes, there are men that are involved in these conversations, absolutely. But we've seen as women that we can't do the same thing that we've always done anymore, because
No.
ultimately women have been treated like women fire. There's like a percentage of like 75% of women fire the financial advisor in the first year because they're treated
Yeah,
like shit. They're treated like a second citizen. And it's like,
exactly.
no, I'm the one with the capital. Hello.
One of the first articles I wrote for women about finance, many years ago was about how to find a stockbroker. And I said, if a stockbroker comes to you and says, shouldn't we be talking to your husband about this, love? Just ignore him and keep
There,
going. And
there,
I got all
there.
this mail, all these letters sent to the publication saying, that happened to me. Like literally that happened.
Yeah, and it still does. And it's okay. Like it's not to be taken personally. It's just the level of consciousness that still exists. But I'm seeing
Yeah.
a huge movement towards a different way of doing things. And it's wonderful actually to realize that
Mm,
actually if somebody's inheriting, there has to be some sort of planning as to the conversations about how do they feel about this, what is going on for them, as opposed to, well, we'll create the structure and then you just get on with it, which is basically how it was done in the past. And that just
mm,
doesn't work.
yeah. Yeah. And some financial advisors and wealth managers too will say things like, well, there's certain people who just shouldn't be allowed to manage their own money. And I just think that's just showing such a lack of confidence in us because, yeah, I mean, different people have different approaches, but
But
maybe,
managing money and stewarding money is a skill. And like with
yeah,
any skill, it just takes practice. So
yeah,
um it's once I remember a mentor of mine saying, once difficult, now easy. It's
mm,
like going to the gym.
yeah,
You know, at the beginning, you're like, what, which is the machine I need to use? How does it even work? And it can feel very overwhelming, but it means nothing
yeah,
about you. And I think this is where we get caught up. It's like, it's nothing about you or your capacity or capability to learn. It's
mm,
just you're in the nascent stages of learning. Of course, it's going to feel confusing. There was a time when you couldn't even drive or walk or whatever, but you kept going and you kept going and you kept going. You know, fear isn't the signal to make you stop. Like you can make it, it can make you stop, but the fear is saying you're at an edge that if you keep going, you'll know that fear will dissolve because ultimately you'll be in the next version of that identity. Then you'll hit another edge.
yeah,
And it's not asking you to go back. Resistance is biological. It's normal. It's that you're about to move through into another reality, into another one. And before you know it, you're living a completely different life to the one that you were living a year ago. I mean, I've seen it for myself. I mean, it's just
mm,
extraordinary. If you
mm,
allow, if you allow, if you allow it. And I think that that is, yeah, for me, allowing is a really big part of this, is to allow those desires to come in, to allow yourself to listen, to allow yourself to have the boundaries, to allow yourself to do all of these things because it's who you really are. All of the other
mm,
stuff is just conditioning. And I just say just conditioning, it's conditioning because it's not just conditioning is basically what keeps us doing the same thing over and over again.
mm. Cool. All right, I think we'll leave it there.
Okay.
Um, thanks so much for your time. It's really, really insightful.